Welcome back to the Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
It's October, which
It
I
is.
believe is it Down Syndrome Awareness Month? Is that right?
Yes, it is.
So today I am just thrilled to have a wonderful mom joining us today, Kelly Nava. She's a pastor's wife, mama of two, and a copy editor at Concordia Publishing House. Wrote a fantastic blog post for us there at the CPH blog. That's blog.cph.org. And we'll share the link in the program notes today. Kelly, thanks so much for being our guest on the Coffee Hour today.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm happy to be here.
So tell us about your experience with Down syndrome.
You know, prior to having a child with Down syndrome myself, my experience with it was very limited. But I have a daughter and she was born 8 years ago. So now I've got 8 years in the trenches just under my belt and plenty of experiences along those lines now.
Mm-hmm. How much did you know about Down syndrome before your daughter was born?
Honestly, not much. I knew, I think, one person personally with Down syndrome, and that was a family member's spouse's brother that I'd met maybe on 2 occasions. And so it was a very limited amount of knowledge, but I tell you, I learned a lot really fast as soon as we found out that our daughter has it. Much study and much research, and I know a good bit now.
Mm-hmm. And your daughter is adorable. She is one of the cutest kids, and I know she might be a little terror too. But she's just adorable.
Thank you.
What was that like learning that your daughter had Down syndrome?
You know, it was actually a very interesting experience. One thing that most people who have children with Down syndrome, I would say most people are aware of it ahead of time because they have amniocentesis during pregnancy, which is like the genetic screening to see if there's any abnormalities. And we kind of forewent that. So we didn't know that our daughter had Down syndrome until about an hour after she was born. So we had her at home, and our midwife gave us like that hour of bonding time that you're supposed to have with your newborn baby. And then she had a chat with us where she told us that she thought that our daughter might have Down syndrome based on some certain characteristics that she observed. And when you hear news like that, and you've just given birth like an hour ago, like you're still high on adrenaline. You don't really process that. But yeah, we learned it very quickly from our midwife, and then we learned it very quickly from our pediatrician when we took our daughter in 2 days later, and some really scary medical stuff started to manifest like in the doctor's office, and it became very real very soon for us.
Mm-hmm.
Did it take a while to process that? What was it like processing that? And is this your first daughter? Is that correct?
Yeah. So she was our firstborn child, and I would say that processing things, and especially processing things properly and effectively, didn't happen for a long time because everything sort of hit all at once. And the series of medical issues that came up were very fast, and there were a lot of them. So you're kind of in survival mode in the first place when you have a newborn. But when you couple that with suddenly you have 2 heart defects that require surgery because they're critical heart defects, and lung issues that make it so that your daughter has to stay on oxygen for an extended amount of time just in everyday life. That makes things difficult to process for a while until you're really out of those traumatic moments.
Did you have anyone to support you through that time of learning and processing and wanting to love and care for your daughter?
Yeah, what was really crazy was that this kind of happened within the first year or so of my husband's first call. So his first call was to my hometown in Southern California, which was crazy, absolutely crazy and very unexpected. And so being in that position geographically meant that my family and his family were really close by. And not only did we have our family very close by to help us out with all of the things, we had our congregation as well who, wanted to support their new pastor and his family. And we were actually by one of the best, I would say, hospitals for infant and cardiac care in Southern California. So it actually worked out really nicely for us to be right where we were right at that time. Thank the good Lord for that.
Mm-hmm. It is sometimes the foreknowledge of God, it just kind of whacks you in the face sometimes that all of these things just kind of happen, and you don't really realize how perfect the situation is until you're in the middle of it. And thank God for his providing for all of us. What are some things you've learned from your daughter over the last 8 years?
I would say the biggest thing that I've learned from her is how to slow down a bit. She goes at her own pace, and with Down syndrome, with this developmental disability, she hits milestones at a completely different schedule than a typical child might. So many things are delayed, and it's taught me patience, for one, which is great because I needed that anyway. But yeah, we like to call it, we're taking the scenic route with her. And we appreciate the little things so much more, and we take great joy in the little things that spark joy in her. Maybe we wouldn't have paid attention to before, but something silly catches her attention and she belly laughs at it. It's suddenly just this brilliant masterpiece to us that we would have otherwise missed.
Mm-hmm.
What have you learned from your daughter and your experience of being a parent of a child with Down syndrome about how we love and value people with disabilities?
Gosh, I just look at myself before I knew who she was, and I know, like, in my blog post, I said, let's not nudge people towards the margins. Let's not do that. Let's not be the people who walk on by. Let's not be the disciples who are like, oh, hey, look at that blind guy over there. And I see that in myself from before I had my daughter. I know that I dismissed people towards the margins, especially those who were developmentally different than me, because I know that it is challenging to sit with discomfort when you don't know how to interact with people. So I would say that I've learned not to be that way as much. It's an ongoing thing to better oneself in that way. But I think that's one of my biggest takeaways. It's like I've got a daughter now who people will nudge to the margins, and I'm very cognizant of that. And I don't want that for her, and I don't want that for other people either.
Mm-hmm. How have your experiences affected your vocations, both you and your husband's vocations as being a pastor and a pastor's wife in a congregation? How have these experiences affected where you are in this station in life?
I think it's also taught our congregations a lot of patience. Because oftentimes as a pastor's wife, there's some expectations there. But
yeah, I guess
y'all know what I'm talking about. There are some expectations that are built into that role, and having a daughter whose needs supersede many things in my life has taught my the people in my husband's congregation that sometimes I will not be available or have the energy or to help out in ways that maybe other pastors' wives would be very willing or available to do. So it's really focused my vocation to a very narrow point, I would say, but in a really good way, because being a wife and a mom, I consider those my top two things. Everything else comes very secondary, and that includes being a pastor's wife. Mm-hmm. So I now have a very greater than I would have expected burden of responsibility to my daughter.
What do you want your children to know about their identity and their value, where that comes from?
Well, I could do the very Lutheran response. I really actually cling to the fact that of my daughter's baptism, which we did when she was 2 days old in the hospital, kind of, on pins and needles for her life, honestly. And so, I want her identity to derive so strongly from that baptism, from that saving grace, because she may not be able to articulate her faith, and she may not be able to do that for a while, but I want her to know that she has been baptized and she has been claimed by God, and that is her identity, and then same for our other daughter as well. I want her, who is, learning to be able to articulate her faith at 4 years old, which is adorable. But same for her as well. I want her to be able to know that, at the end of the day, this is where my identity is. It's in the fact that I have been, claimed and seized by God.
And thanks be to God for that good gift in holy baptism. Amen.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Kelly, what a beautiful story. And thank you for taking your time to share this story with us and with our listeners today. I really appreciate it.
You're so welcome.
Kelly Nava's pastor's wife and mama of two and a copy editor at Concordia Publishing House. We'll share the link to her blog post as well in the program notes. You're listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
The Coffee Hour with Andy and Sarah is a production of KFUO. To support the Coffee Hour and KFUO Radio, visit KFUO.org. You can also text KFUO to 41444 or send an email to gifts@KFUO.org. And you can call us at 800-844-0524. KFUO. Christ for you, anytime, anywhere.